Okay, we have the conical tower and circular wall of Great Zimbabwe for this piece. It is in southeastern Zimbabwe. If you look on the map, you can get an idea. On the bottom lower map, uh, right here, this area here is Zimbabwe. Okay, see where South Africa is, and then we have Great Zimbabwe right there. So that's the location, and it's from the Shona people, Shona, and it dates from about 1000 to 1400 CE. It has coursed granite blocks as the materials, and this is another one of those UNESCO World Heritage Sites. Okay, for the context of why this was built and why this is here. First, it is considered the most famous of the sub-Saharan African ancient civilizations, which developed on the Zimbabwean plateau and is named after its most important royal and ritual center at Great Zimbabwe. And the height of Great Zimbabwe is around 1200 CE. Great Zimbabwe's wealth came from intensive cattle rearing and trade in gold with the cities on the East African coast, which then in turn supplied exotic products from as far away as China. And then what they wanted was, for the most part, spices. Part of the trade network that developed along the rivers that are significant in this region, including the Zambezi, Limpopo, and Sabi rivers. The purpose was to funnel gold, ivory, and exotic skins to coastal trading towns built by Arabs and Swahili-speaking Africans. Gold and ivory were exchanged for prestige goods, including porcelain beads and other manufactured items. Trade for this was controlled here at the Great Zimbabwe, the home of the Shona people. The word Zimbabwe comes from the Shona term that translates to venerated house or houses of stone. Originally, the structures were built of wood, but the use of stone indicates an increasingly complex and well-organized society that could invest resources in expensive construction projects. Stone buildings were constructed by the ancestors of the present-day people, and the earliest construction at the site took advantage of the enormous boulders in the area. The masons, or the stone builders, incorporated the boulders and used uniform granite blocks that split naturally from them to build a series of tall, enclosing walls high on a hilltop. Each enclosure defined a family's living space. You can see on the bottom left picture a diagram of what would have been inside this wall. The houses were made of adobe with conical thatched roofs. The stone complex began its construction in the 13th century and is a city of stone towers, palaces, and public buildings, which served as the capital of the large kingdoms. This included royal courts, markets, warehouses, and religious shrines. At the heart of the complex is the palace itself, and that was called the House of the Great Woman. The building was not constructed as an isolated project, but as an extension of the landscaping. Its oval-shaped walls enclosed a large living space, a garden, and a place to keep livestock. The living space also included area for where descendants can establish communion with one another and their ancestors. The largest building at the Great Zimbabwe is located in the broad valley below the hilltop enclosure, known as the Imba Huru, meaning the Great Enclosure. The complex is ringed by a masonry wall that is more than 800 feet long and up to 32 feet tall, and at its base, it's 17 feet thick, so it's huge. Inside the outer wall are numerous smaller stone enclosures and adobe platforms. At its greatest extent, it was thought that the city had more than 8,000 residents. Building at Great Zimbabwe were made out of the ashlar masonry or using mortar. And we talked about that word before. Basically, it's constructing the stones to fit perfectly without using any kind of material to bind it together. The Incas are also famous for the ashlar masonry, and we'll talk about that next week. And then for the stability of the walls, they were quote unquote battered or built so that they slope inward towards the top. This was the largest of the ancient structures south of the Sahara Desert. The scale is unequaled to anywhere in sub-Saharan Africa, and that really gives a lot of significance to why this is important. The larger it is, the more important it is. Okay, so for the significance of this piece, it was built on a hilltop, but there's no evidence that it was constructed as a fortress. And that's important because usually when we think of walled cities, we think of protection. You think of, especially on top of a hill that you're trying to keep out invaders. But there's no indication they did that. There's no openings for weapons, no battlements for warriors to stand on. Instead, the walls and the structures are intended, and this is really important, intended to reflect the wealth and power of the city's rulers. The stone walls of all of the Zimbabwe's structures was to serve as symbols of prestige, status, or royal authority. The Imbuhuru, a royal residence and surrounding structure, housed members of the royals' family court. The complex formed a nucleus of a city, and it radiated out for almost a mile in all directions. The structure had been added to over time, and later additions are distinguished by dressed or smoothly finished stones laid in fine and even level courses. One of the later structures is this conical tower, this one right here, this conical tower. And the conical tower is 18 feet in diameter, 30 feet tall, and it originally was capped with 3 courses of ornamental stonework. It was constructed between 2 buildings, and it resembles a granary or a storage for granary. Not necessarily that that was its use, but that's what it resembled. Historians believe that maybe it represented that if they had this constructed, there would be a good harvest and prosperity. They believe that this could result from the allegiance to the ruler of the Great Zimbabwe. So at the height of its power in the 14th century, Great Zimbabwe and its surrounding city housed more than 10,000 people. It also contained goods including Portuguese medallions, Persian pottery, and Chinese porcelain, all of that attesting to the extent of its trade network. Now, Great Zimbabwe after the 14th century is going to decline in a pretty rapid manner, and that's because this used to be one of the most important trading areas for for the Eastern African that goes into the the Indian Oceans and Saudi Arabia and through Asia. But when at the beginning of the 15th century, Great Zimbabwe was gradually abandoned as control of the lucrative Southeast African trade network passed to the Mwene, Mwene, Mutapa, and Kami empires that were a short distance away and a little bit closer to the coast. Okay, and I've got another picture just so you could see how tall it is on the outside. So you could see this man standing here. I don't know who that is. I got it off the internet. But you could see if an average sized man would be what, like 5'9", 5'10", and he's standing above this huge wall at the Great Zimbabwe. And look how beautiful all of these each individual stones are placed. It's thought that there was used up to 1 million bricks to create the conical tower and circular wall of the Great Zimbabwe. Okay, that's it for Great Zimbabwe.